My name is Ty. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm real grateful about being a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because a little over 2 years ago I was half dead. At least spiritually I was fully dead. I believe the best way to start this thing off is at the beginning, and I don't mean by the time I took a first drink. I mean at the beginning. And because as I look at it through the eyes I have today, I don't know about my alcoholism, but I know my thinking patterns were messed up at a very early age, about 3. When I came into the program and had a little time under my belt, I had to do one of those things called a step, and it was the 4th step. And the things I found hard about that were what some people might call 6 secrets. And those are the ones I kind of want to take to the grave with me. But I found those are the ones that were killing me all my life. I was listening to a tape. I'd been hurting for months. I'd been hurting and didn't know what it was, and I was listening to a tape one night, driving down the road over to my sponsor's house, and this guy was talking, and he was talking about a little baby. And he was talking about a little baby that had been abused, and how that little baby got his self-worth out of that abuse, good or bad, how he was treated as a child. And what the picture that came to mind as this guy was talking, he says, when a child is small and he's in the arms of his mother, he sees that he's lovable. He doesn't comprehend what he looks at when he looks at in the mirror. What he comprehends is when he's held and he's loved, he comprehends he's lovable. But whenever he's hit and whenever he's beat, he comprehends hurt and that I deserve that some way. And things just started flowing out after that. And I usually like to start things off with this little story, and it always has more meaning each time I talk. And it says something about my whole life. It was when I was 3, I grew up in an abusive home till the age of 3. And my father, he had an uncontrollable temper. And one day I was over at the grandparents' house, and I was eating lunch. And my dad, he's like real strict about everything. And he says, well, eat your salad first. And I said no, because I'm 3 years old. I said, no, I'm going to eat my pudding first. That's normal. For a little baby, I think that's normal. And he said, no, you eat your salad. And I was rebellious then. I sometimes still am, but I ate my pudding. And I went home, and I got a beating. And what that means to me is that I don't have the choice of being human. I don't have the choice to make a mistake without getting slapped upside the head. I didn't have that choice, you know. And there was nothing I could do about that then. Nothing at all. And it hurt. And as I look at that, and I look at my relationships today with other people and my entire life, what I did with that incident is I took what he did to me, and I got my self-worth out of that. And I've done that my entire life. How you treated me was how I got my self-worth, good or bad. If you liked me, I was likable. If you didn't, I was dirt. And that's the way it's always been. And that starts off at a very early age, I think. Well, I took this thing to my sponsor, and I said, I can't believe I was angry. You know, I told him, and my sponsor said, well, yeah, that's fine, but where were you wrong? Where were you wrong? And I can't say that I was really wrong, but somewhere in there I had some part to play with what was going on. And I couldn't figure it out. I was real mad when he asked me where was I wrong, what control did I have, what power did I have to change that circumstance? None. And he told me. And he says, all these years you believed what he did to you was right, and that the image you got of yourself from that was true. And he says, just because, this is his saying, he says, just because somebody says something doesn't make it true, and just because somebody does something doesn't make it right. But for a lifetime it was, and I carried that around. And that was just the foundation. That was just a foundation of mixed emotions and frustration and fears and angers that built upon that every year as I went by. It just compounded. At an early age, my mom left my father because of the abuse. We were both being abused. And I became a very violent child, real rebellious. I didn't know how to handle situations. I didn't know how to handle my anger. I only knew how to handle it one way, and that's the way I was shown, by example. And that is when you're angry, you hurt other people, man, because if I'm hurting, someone's going to hurt. That's just the way it is. I didn't know any other way to do it. And so I'd hurt other people. And one day, I was down at the park playing with my little brother. And we all, you know how little brothers are, they get in fights, they argue, and they get scuffles. And I was scuffling. And boy, I was scuffling. And something happened. Because I was the kind of person that would stuff things until it became like a time bomb just ticking. And that day, I was sitting there with my brother. And I remember looking down. And I remember looking at my brother. And have you ever seen somebody that's been strangled or choked, how their eyes turn blood red? The white just turns where the blood rushes to their head. Well, that's what was happening to my little brother. And he was in my hands. I mean, I was doing that. So, anyway, I found out that this temper was dangerous. And that I couldn't, for any reason, let that go. I just, there wasn't any way. So, I began to stuff them, and stuff them, and stuff them, deeper and deeper. And you know, you get in, I remember my mom taking me to a psychiatrist once when I was young, find out what's wrong with me. And all I did is I went in there and I played a game with a psychiatrist. Man, I had a good alcoholic attitude at an early age. I could play games, even then. And I walked out and the psychiatrist said, well, he's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He's just going through that stage. There wasn't no stage. There was something wrong with me. But you weren't going to know it. Only the ones closest to me knew what was wrong with me because they were the ones that took the abuse. And I'm talking the abuse by not showing them love and being rebellious and no respect. That kind of abuse, that hurts a parent. Anyway, when you get in up to like junior high and you get old enough to where you're kind of becoming a young man or whatever, I guess that's junior high, I don't know. If you get in a fight, see, one of the ways I found that I could deal with my emotions is when I stuffed them is if I got angry, I would cry. I was a crybaby. And that was okay in elementary. I mean, everybody cries a little bit when they're young. But you get into junior high and high school and some guy comes up and picks on you and you start bawling. Well, it doesn't look too good. You know, it just didn't look good at all. So I had to come up with another defense mechanism. And so somebody would pick on me and I would start laughing hysterically. People didn't know what was wrong with me when they'd pick on me. I kind of acted insane. I would just start giggling. They'd just start laughing. And the thing is I was getting so many of these emotions used as defense mechanisms, I couldn't tell how to feel in any given situation. I mean, I was getting confused. What do you do in this situation? What do you do in that? And I didn't know. And I was at a loss. And so I kind of escaped by, I was a daydreamer. I would dream, you know, just of what it was like to be normal, I guess. I don't know. What do little boys dream about? I didn't have a father figure around, and I always knew there was something strange about that. When I was growing up, all the other boys, they would talk about cars and sports and stuff like that. Well, I didn't know any of those things because I was raised by my mother. I knew how to wash clothes, do dishes, iron. And the other boys didn't want to talk about that. Yeah, I knew nothing about that kind of stuff. And I just kind of had to, I was told that being able to fit in somewhere was a survival technique, and I learned that. I learned the jive talk. I learned what you do in what situation so I could fit in. But it wasn't me. And I didn't know who me was. He was getting all mixed up. He was just a little boy down there that stopped growing at a young age, and he was lost in the shambles. So anyway, I started reacting like this. Hysterics, not knowing exactly who I was and how to react and what to do. And I went into high school, and I still hadn't got to a drink yet, but I was pretty screwed up, even at that age. And wherever I went, something that was important to me was trying to make you like me and trying to make you respect me. And I wanted the girls to think I was cute, and I wanted the guys to be intimidated so they know they couldn't touch me. But deep down inside, all I was afraid. I mean, I was just afraid. Because I knew if I was ever confronted with any of those things, I would have to back down. Because I knew I was a loser all my life. That's what I felt like. Doesn't mean I was, but that's what I felt like. I have taken a few drinks. I'll tell you about not my first drink. My first drink, I consider the first drink for anybody is the one that kind of gets me drunk. I don't consider those little sips out of the parents' beer a first drink. I mean, it is, but to me it's not. It's not the one that made the difference. I used to sneak wine out of the kitchen cabinet where my mom thought she hid it from me, but she didn't hide it from me. I could smell that stuff. But I remember one day I was out playing with some older guys. And with older guys, you got to kind of act cool. So I was acting cool. And he said after we stopped playing, we were playing tennis, and after we were done, he said, well, let's go grab a few beers. And I said, well, that sounds mighty fine. And I, personally, I didn't believe in drinking. I could have been an Alateen because I did have parents that drank, and I'd seen the things it could do. But for some reason, just for a moment in time, that thought never crossed my mind. But every time before that, it had. And I don't know what the difference was at that time. But I know that the only thought was, well, why not take a drink? And I took that drink, and something that never happened before happened. I could feel that stuff just go all through me. It was like magic. I mean, I was tingling, I was glowing. And he took me off and he dropped me off at my house, and something that was different. There was something different, because there was nobody around me, but I felt good about myself. I didn't need somebody else's opinions of me to make me feel good. And I could take a slap in the face and still feel fine. And it seemed like dreams were attainable. There wasn't anything I couldn't do or anybody I couldn't be if I just had a little bit of that drink. And I went to work that night. Got called in. I wasn't supposed to work, so I was kind of under the gun when I went into work drunk. First time I ever took a drink. And I walked in, and you know how are you when you're drunk? You're easy when it comes to being yourself, whoever that is. But your guards are down. You just feel fine about who you are. And I could just be myself. And it seemed like all the girls kind of thought I was cuter, and all the guys thought I was a little, cooler. And that made a difference. That made a difference. Because I thought I'd found some kind of answer. The answer to making it in this world is that bottle. And alcohol from the very first drink controlled what I was going to do. Because that next weekend, I knew where I was going to be. I was going to be drinking. And already it had taken control. But I want to tell you something about before I took that drink, as I look back at all the things, the way I used to act and the way I used to think, it just looks like a dry drunk. That's how it looks to me. It's just like a dry drunk. A drunk waiting to happen. And so I kept on drinking. A little bit here, a little bit there. Loving what it did for me. Things were attainable in a bottle. And things were possible. I started hanging around with a group of friends that drank more often. Changed my lifestyle. Alcohol just didn't change the way I felt. It changed everything about me from an early age. One thing I found out one night about drinking is, after we go drinking sometimes, we'd go up to this little bar, or it was a pizza place after football games, and we'd get drunk and rowdy and do all the things young people do. And a guy wanted to fight with me because I had long hair, because I looked like a hippie. And he said something to the effect, "Are you a homosexual?" And I smarted off to him and I said, "No, you're looking for a date." And he didn't like that. And so he wanted to start fighting. And I said, "No, come on, have a few beers. One thing I'd always do is I'd try to make friends with my enemies because I knew that was the wisest thing to do. Because I was a coward. So he drank my beer and he still wanted to beat me up. And there was a bunch of girls around, a bunch of guys, and I knew I was going to get my ego smashed in this deal, and I just knew that I was going to back down because it doesn't matter if the guy was 4 foot tall, I was going to get my rear kicked. But all I do is, if I were in that kind of situation, I'll curl up in a ball. I'm a runner, always have been. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I went over to a friend's house. I walked in the door and nobody was there. And there was a bottle of Everclear sitting up on the counter. And I sat down on the floor and I grabbed that bottle of Everclear and I just kind of started pouring Everclear into that cap and I'd take a drink. And I'd pour some more into that cap and I'd take a drink. And I had my first blackout. I woke up hanging over a 2-story building. I was over the rail looking down at the ground. I didn't know how I got there. Some friends were coming up the stairs. I didn't leave the place. I just wandered around. And some friends were coming upstairs with some more drinks, and we were going to start drinking again because I had just come to. But for a moment, I realized something else about alcohol. It's not just a thing to help me feel the way I want to feel and do the things I wanted to do, but it was a hell of a painkiller. Because all that stuff that had happened at that pizza joint, it didn't affect me a bit. You know, it's like it never happened. It didn't matter. And that's what I was looking for. I don't think I was really looking for a way to feel. I think I was looking for a way not to. When I found out alcohol could do that, that's what I used it for. I've had a lot of opportunities. I am young, but alcohol has stripped some things away from my life. I have had opportunities to do things with my life that have all been passed up as a result of alcohol. When I got out of high school, I enlisted in the Navy. And by this time, I had started doing other drugs. And one of the things about the Navy is you're not supposed to do drugs. So I didn't do drugs. But I got kicked out for smoking pot the night before I was supposed to go to the Navy outlet and be shipped off. And I blame this on my alcoholism, not the drugs, because it wouldn't have happened maybe if I didn't take a drink. But I took a drink, and my thinking changed, and my defenses went down, and I got stoned, and I wasn't in the Navy. It was alcoholism. It wasn't drug addiction. One doesn't follow the other, you know. And so I'd lost that. So I called my parents up and I told them, I said I didn't make it in the Navy because I'd been smoking pot the night before. And they said, that's all right, come home. And I have some friends come pick me up and I say, well, let's go get stoned and drunk on the way back. All right, I just get kicked out of the Navy because of alcohol and drug abuse, but on the way back, we're getting drunk and stoned. Because that's how I feel good. You know, that's how I feel like life is somehow manageable. But it wasn't. It wasn't at all. So they bring me back. I get a job at a health club working as a fitness instructor. And doing drinking on the side, staying in shape, doing drugs and alcohol. After this incident, I started doing heavier and heavier drugs. I got wrapped up with another crowd. I started trying things like cocaine and speed and pills and stuff like that, as well as alcohol. And I lost that job, and I started going to school. So I'd lost a job, and I'd lost a potential career as a result of alcohol. I was 19. And I go to school, and I lasted 3 weeks, and I got kicked out of that, or at least I dropped out. I had no motivation. I had no dreams anymore. They were all gone. All I wanted to do was drink and use drugs and hang around with my friends and have fun. That's what I called it. But it didn't last. It didn't last at all. I found out something also about drugs. Is when I took drugs, if I drank a little bit, here's one of the main reasons I started taking drugs, is when I drank, I felt mellow, I felt good, I felt numb. But if I took cocaine, I felt hyper, I felt up, I felt good. If I took ecstasy, I felt sexy. I mean, if y'all know what the love drugs are, boy, I felt like I was in love with everybody. If I took LSD, I was in outer space, away from everybody. And what I found out about this is that I now had the potential to choose how I want to feel. See? I didn't just have to feel drunk and anesthetized, but I could feel happy, I could feel sad, I could feel like I wanted to love everybody, I could feel insane, I could feel mellow. And for the first time in my life, I had some choice about the matter as to how does Ty want to feel. And all that mattered was how much money you got in your pocket and what are you willing to do. What are the prices you're willing to pay? My prices took me, I consider, a low bottom. I moved out of the house because one thing about having a drug habit was that you got to make some pretty good money to have a habit. So I started dealing drugs a little bit here and there. And I quit my jobs so I could deal more drugs. And if anybody's seen the commercial, I dealt drugs so I could make money so I could buy more drugs, so I could deal drugs so I could make more money so I could buy drugs and do drugs. and over and over and over again. And it was just an endless cycle. But one thing I thought I would get out of this deal by going out there and dealing is I thought I might have the money. Some of the things I wanted to have, I'll tell you. I wanted to have a car, because every guy needs a car. I wanted to have my own place, because every guy needs his own place. I wanted to have a girl under my arm, because every guy's got to have a girl. I wanted to have fancy clothes, and I wanted some respect. But I didn't know the person's respect that I needed was my own, man. That's what I've been missing all my life. It wasn't the respect I was trying to get from you. It was the respect I never had for myself. So I found that I could get these things slowly but surely through dealing drugs and hanging around with that crowd. And not only did I do that, but I was a thief, and I was a con. I just kind of acquired things here and there. And I moved down to this place in Houston called Westheimer, because that's where all the cool drug dealers hang out. And I, by the way, don't think there's anything cool about drug dealing. I did when I thought I came in here. I thought it was a status symbol. I think it's a joke. It was how sick. It was just sick. But it's okay. But I started acquiring some of these things. I started acquiring, a guy gave me a car. I had plenty of places to stay because I would just choose a friend's house and give them a little of this, a little money, a few drugs, a few drinks, whatever they wanted, and have a place to stay. Or I'd promise them this and promise them that. And I'd talk. I was a talker. But that stuff will only hold up so long. And I got a place to stay down there. I kept on doing those things. But something was happening. I was losing control of the amount I took, when I took it, what happened when I took drugs and alcohol. I had no control anymore. The amounts I was taking was just, it was way too much. By the time I came in, I was doing quite a bit, and I just couldn't live on it. I just couldn't live on it. One thing about being out there on the streets and doing the things I did is sometimes it's not always the alcohol and the drugs that get you. Sometimes it's the friends you make that stab you in the back. And I can't say that to put them down, because I've stabbed many a friend in the back. That's one thing about me, is I was always two-faced. One of the reasons is because when I was with this guy, I wanted to be liked by him. So if he was talking about Joe Blow, I'd say, yeah, that guy's so-and-so. But if I was with Joe Blow and he was talking about the other guy, well, yeah, uh-huh. But one day I got caught in a situation to where they were both there and they were wanting me to take sides. And so my hypocrisy got me in trouble, being two-faced. But see, I had no ideas of my own. I was who you wanted me to be. Whatever I had to do to have you like me was acceptable, whatever price that was. But the price in the end may not be what you think it is. You know, it wasn't for me. I thought somehow out of all these things I was going to get some kind of fame and glory. You know, I thought I was going to end up good in the deal, but I didn't. I didn't at all. I met old Derek down here, and I'd say for the last 2 months of my drinking, he was the only friend I had, because everybody else had just kicked me out. They didn't want nothing to do with me. They were tired of getting lied to, and they were tired of finding things missing, and they were just tired of the games, and they didn't want anything to do with me. And I understand that today, because I don't like to be played with either. But I couldn't see that then, because I was real selfish. I started doing some things up in Austin. I was going here and doing things like that, you know, little deals here, little deals there, messing with a few people. And I did some things that people didn't like, and I made some enemies. And one night I ended up in Austin, and I was running. Ended up on 6th Street down there. It seems that one of my best friends that I'd known in high school had turned against me, because he had a right to, because of something I did. And he had put a contract out on me. And one night when I was over at this friend's house, I'd found out that these weren't friends at all, but it was a setup that had been taking place. And I took it off running. And I ran for about 2.5 hours until I couldn't run anymore. I was on a lot of speed and a lot of drinking and pills and everything. So I was kind of numb. And after 2 hours, I couldn't run anymore. And I stopped in the middle of the road, and I said, that's it. Let them have me. Because it didn't matter to me anymore. I'd done everything I wanted to do. I tried to make that life the best thing I could with everything I had, and it didn't work, and it got me where I was. And I just said, I was wrong. I screamed this aloud because I knew the guys were there. And I said, just come and get me. Doesn't matter. But some things started to happen to me. I'd had this desire come over me, a desire to live. And I started saying the Lord's Prayer, best I could, with a few four-lettered words in it because I was panicky, and I really wanted him to hear me. I thought I'd get his attention that way. And the thoughts that started going through my mind weren't thoughts that I would normally have. I started missing some things. Before that, the things I wanted were mostly material. But things started going through my mind like, whenever you're faced with a life and death situation, things go through your mind like, man, wouldn't it be nice to see a sunset before I go? Or boy, wouldn't it be nice to grow up and be normal and have a wife and kids and a 40-hour-a-week job? Wouldn't it be nice to go to church on Sunday? Wouldn't it be nice to walk on the beach? Or just eat at a nice restaurant? Things you just take for granted, man. But when you're dead, you don't got none of them. They're all gone. And those things were never goals in my life. Just to have simple things weren't goals in my life. For some reason, I had to have prestige. I had to have some kind of power. I had to have some kind of control. And what I really had to have was some self-respect. But no one told me that. I started running again as this desire overcame me. And I wanted to live pretty bad. And as I was running, I was saying the Lord's Prayer, and I was saying, God, if you get me out of this one, you know the prayer? And I looked behind me, and I saw 3 little mailboxes, and above each little mailbox, I saw a head peeping over looking at me, and I knew it was them. And so I turned a corner, and I kept on running, and I said, God, one more time. And I looked behind me, and they were gone. I found the nearest gas station. I made it back to the hotel room, packed up my stuff, and I came home. And I was wondering, what am I going to do? Because when them guys want you, they want you. And you can't run anywhere. You can't hide. A week before that, I'd OD'd on some drugs and alcohol. But see, that wasn't a scare enough for me. I needed something I couldn't run from. But you see, I can run from the fear of alcohol and drugs by more alcohol and drugs. But I can't run from them people. They're going to be there drunk or sober. So I ended up back in Houston. I was going to this nightclub. What am I going to do? I'm confused. I didn't have anything really to speak of. I had no place to stay. I was walking through this nightclub. Music was going. I love those places. The lights, the smell, everything. I love them. Used to. And I look over in the corner, and I see this guy sitting over there. And it was the guy that had the contract put out on me. I knew it was an opportunity, but I didn't know for what. I went over there, and I said, here I am. And he thought I was dead. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, I'm sorry, but what can I do? I'm just out here spinning my wheels, and all I want to do is just get back to some kind of level of reality, man. I'm just lost in it. Because you get lost in the muck, unless somebody comes and grabs you and leads you out by the hand, you're lost. And there wasn't nobody out there. But this was the guy that was going to lead me by the hand to where I needed to go. He turned to me and he said, Ty, you're not the guy I knew 2 years ago when you were my friend. You used to be the kind of guy that everybody used to like to be around. He's kind of fun at parties, nice, clean, had a little respect, even though I didn't know it. Maybe I was faking it. He said, but look at you, man. What are you? What do you become? And I said, well, yeah, but you don't understand. See, I can't beat this thing. I got to get out of here. If you're going to do your thing, do it to me. I'll go out in the back and you can do it. But I don't want to go on running. I don't want that kind of life. He says, I'm going to tell you what. I went into a rehab program, and I have to go to some Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for parole. Now, I know that you have problems with your parents, because I did not want to go home. One thing I did when I left home is my parents weren't going to know that I was wrong. I had set out to do it my way, on my own, and they were not going to know that I had screwed up, because I was full of pride. But I think that night, I might just be a little bit willing. He says, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to go home and I'm going to talk to your parents. I'm going to tell them how you're doing. I'm going to tell them that you're ready to come home, and I'm going to make arrangements to come pick you up and take you home. This is the same guy that was going to kill me. Now, God works, and I didn't even have one. He came out that next day, and he picked me up, and he took me home to see my parents. And I walked in the house, and I saw my mom and my stepdad, and I hadn't seen them for quite a while. And it was a relief. But there was something going on in my mind, and I knew that one more time it was just another game. I'm just going to stay here long enough to get things together and get things straightened out, and back I go. Just to get the heat off, because I'm going to get out. But it wasn't that way. They set down some pretty firm rules for me. I think I am real grateful, because I know a lot of people that come in that are young people in sobriety, and their parents are not in the program, and sometimes they get, parents sometimes misunderstand. And they have problems, and I think I'm real fortunate that both my parents are in the program, because I think not only do they understand, but they are there for examples. And I think my home life is great today as a result of 3 people trying to work a program the best they can. That old friend of mine, since he was going to the program now, he says, I'm going to start taking you to meetings. And we started going to meetings. My first meeting, I walk in, and I sit down, and then they go through the normal routine. And I pick up a desired chip, and I come back, and I sit down, and everyone kind of stands around and drinks coffee after the meetings. And they talk and hug and rub up against each other. And this little old man was sitting in the back corner, and he just had his eye on me all night. And this big old man was standing right next to him. And they told me to come over here. And I don't know, I was kind of hesitant about this. This guy looked kind of rough. He was smaller than me. But that didn't matter. He just, you could look at him and tell he was mean. And he was mean. He said, hey boy, come over here. So I came over there. He says, you're real tough, aren't you? I didn't say anything, but in the back of my mind I said, yep. He says, you're real cool, aren't you? I said, yeah. He says, you are so cool that you need to take them icicles off your ass. He said, you're so tough that you beat yourself to death getting here. Well, he was right, but I wasn't going to let him know that. He says, you want to get sober? I said, yeah, I'm thinking about it. And I think the best I could, I made a decision that night that I'm just going to try to quit drinking and drugging just for a little while. Just for a little while to see if I can do it. And he says, why don't you give me a call, or why don't you meet me over at this place so-and-so time? And I started spending time with this man. And he started giving me a few things to do here and there. Going to meetings, talking to people. He gave me a list of 7 things to do. And these are the things that I do daily still today. Among them are prayer, reading literature, speaking to other alcoholics, making meetings, speaking with your sponsor. And one of the most important ones, I think, is do something good for somebody today and get away with it with nobody knowing. And as long as I try to do those things, I can somehow maintain a level of peace and serenity most of the time. Now, this wasn't the steps. This was just a plan of action that got me into the groove of things, got me used to having to do something to stay sober, got me involved in some kind of AA activity. I stayed sober for about, I wouldn't say 30 days, but I got my 30-day chip because I lied. I had been drinking on and off, and it was funny because before I had taken those drinks, I had read something out of the 12 and 12. It was talking about raising the bottom on different levels of alcoholics. And it's as if you disclose basically the truth about the illness to an alcoholic. Whenever he goes out and drinks, he's going to think to himself, maybe those guys are right. I went to a party that night, and I started drinking, and I noticed all the friends around me that were drinking. They were drinking kind of slow, and I was kind of drinking kind of fast, and I was going back for seconds and thirds, and I wasn't overdoing it, but I noticed that my need for alcohol was growing as I drank. The more I drank, the more I needed. And a thought crossed my mind, just like they said it would, maybe those AA guys are right. But it didn't make much of a difference. I went out again, and I went to one of the things I used to justify, or as I used for denial, was I didn't have an allergy for alcohol, that craving. Well, I went out one night, and we went to a bar, and this old friend I rode with, he fed me enough just to make me pissed. That's all he gave me to drink, was enough to make me mad, because he wouldn't give me any more. And as the night went on, I could kind of tell, boy, I need something, and something was happening. I needed a drink. And so some of the denial was broke down then. And again, the thought crossed my mind, maybe those AA guys are right. Well, what finally caught up with me is the thing about when you go to a meeting and you're lying. You know the guilt you get? You know the pain you get? Well, I couldn't get away with it. I think I'm real soft. I don't like pain. I think that keeps me teachable. I was sitting in my bedroom one night, or I was sitting in my living room, and my stepdad was so kindly reading me a chapter out of the big book. You know, because I couldn't think straight. And I didn't know, I thought, and I had honestly thought that I had said, I'm just going to try to quit drinking. You know, I can tell alcohol has pretty much beat me. When I got here, I had nothing. I was close to dead. What was wrong? And I didn't know what was wrong. But something happened that night as the pain got more and more intense. I became more and more willing to do something about it. And finally, when I had all I could stand, I bowed my head and I said, God, I can't take any more. I've had all I can stand. I've done the best I could and got nowhere. And this just ain't going to cut it for me. And so I'm going to make a deal with you. If you'll just promise me everything's going to be okay, I'm going to give this thing a shot. And when I lifted my head, something happened. I have never been, not even to this day, as peaceful as I was that night. And I had one thought implanted in my mind, was everything's going to be all right. And some days that's the only thing that carries me on. When I'm having a hard time and I'm having a hard time believing and I don't have any faith, I got to look back to one day where God took a little time out of his day and he came down just to give me a message. And that was, everything's going to be all right. As I look back on it now, I know what was wrong with the first time I'd somewhat tried to do a first step and say, okay, I'm beat. Was the second part of that first step, and that was the unmanageability. Yeah, my life was unmanageable as far as circumstance goes. As far as material goes, my life was unmanageable. But to me, and I believe this is a personal program with your own personal ideas and viewpoints. But when I look at that unmanageability, and I still look at it this way today, is that unmanageability occurred on April 27th of 1988 down in my guts and not in my finances. And when it still does that today, when the unmanageability gets too much in my guts, I got to change or I got to drink. And I still use that today because it works. So something was different about me. I knew something was different. I knew some power had touched me that night. And that my life was heading in a different direction. I knew what it was I wanted. I've known that my entire life. At one time in my life, I was willing to pay any price to have peace of mind. Because every time I took a drink or took a pill, I had peace of mind. I was willing to give up careers. I was willing to give up family. I was willing to give up a home. I was willing to give up jobs for peace of mind. Because I did it every time I took a drink. But now they tell me you don't have to take a drink to get it. so I had a way to go. I got with this guy and I said, well, how exactly do you get these things? And he says, well, come with me, I'm going to show you. And slowly, but surely, as we do this thing, and we're still doing it today, he sets an example. And I believe that's an important part of sponsorship. I believe strongly in it, because I believe that 90% of all sponsorship is by example, not talk. And he does that. Okay. Some of the things I've got to do since I've been here and have got to discover was, when I got to that 4-step I was telling you about, I had done one when I was early on in the program, and it read kind of like a movie script. It was what this guy did to me and that guy did to me. But it was really it didn't have anything to do with what I did to anybody else and how I played a part in where I was. And I think that's why I think that helped to take the edge off, to find out what some of the things were that hurt me. But I think that wasn't going to cut it. And I went back and I took that inventory with a little more time. And I think the difference is I had a friend giving a talk one night, and he was giving it on the principles of the program. And he said the principles of 1, 2, 3 are honesty, faith, and action. And the principle of number 4 was courage. And it dawned on me that I couldn't have any courage if I didn't have any honesty, faith, and if I hadn't been taking any action. That's why I think it was important that I practice steps 1, 2, and 3 for about that first 8 or 9 months I did. I had taken them the first month that I'd got my next chip. I'd taken them when I bowed my head and I surrendered, because I knew God was there. And that night I said, I give up. So I worked steps 1, 2, and 3. But I think I had to practice them. I had to get used to the feel of them. And after I did that, I had enough courage to take an honest look at myself. And I found out there were all kinds of things about me that I had done, things in my character that made me who I was. And I wrote all these things down just like everybody does. And I took them to my sponsor, and I kind of did my 5th step piecemeal. I'd give him a little bit here, half-truth there, half-truth there. I wasn't one of those kind of persons that go over to the sponsor's house and spends 5 hours and tell him everything. Maybe I'd say him 15 minutes to stay and let a little slip. Here's a little bit of my 5th step. Wouldn't tell him that's what it was, but just to get it out because it was hurting me. Eventually, he knows everything about me. He knows everything about me. After I did this, I found out that I was starting to get I was starting to feel like I fit. Because I never fit anywhere. I remember when I used to hang out there in the bars and stuff like that, one of the things I always said I did is I'd hang out in them low-class bars so I could feel like I was high class. Because look at the bums around me. And then one day some guy said to me, he says, did you ever consider that those guys hang around you for the same reason you hang around them? And yeah, that thought crossed my mind right then. So I found a place I was beginning to fit. But I found out I had a lot of behavior problems. I was real angry. See, all those things I buried for all those years were coming back to the surface. And one more time, I didn't know how to deal with them. I mean, what do? I'd gone 19 years without any sane behavior. And if it was sane, it was few and far between. And that anger was getting to me. And one day I was at work. There was a guy that worked there. Here's one of the things that I really have a problem with in Alcoholics Anonymous is breaking my anonymity. I've had 3 jobs, and every one of them knows where I am. And I've had to learn 3 different lessons from that. The first job I was at, the guy that worked there was a practicing alcoholic. And his jokes were, you're a wimp. You have no willpower. He'd come in with 2 garbage bags full of beer cans and say, I drink this in a week. And he's making jokes about me being in the ozone. He says my brain is fried. And he was drinking 2 or 3 cases a week. And so I put up with that. Next job I went to, I had to put up with an alcoholic who was 12 years sober. but didn't have a program. And he and I had a personality clash after a while. And this anger was starting to get the best of me, but I knew this old boy could take me out anytime he wanted to. And he got down off his forklift one day when I made a smart remark, and he says, let's take it outside. And I said, no. Because as a coward, as usual. So I went home and I looked at what I'd done to make this thing go wrong. And I went back the next day and apologized. A few days later, it happened again, and I smarted off. And this time, it was harder to back out. And I backed out, and I went home and I looked at it. And this deal happened 2 or 3 times more. And each time it got harder to change my action and behavior. And I believe that happens with anything that comes up in my life where I need to change, is each time it's not going to get simpler, it's going to get harder. And that last time when I finally come to grips with some of my anger, I was sitting there and I just kept my mouth shut. And a thought crossed my mind, is who's going to win? Because it was important. It was important to see who's going to come out of this thing on top. Who's going to look bad and who's going to look good. And I found out for me that being an alcoholic, I win when I maintain my peace and serenity, whether I back out of a fight or not. I win when I leave there and said I did the best job I could. People smart off me today, hey, if I turn my back, I win. Not them. Little 3-year-old girl can get out there and have a yelling contest with them. Doesn't make a difference to me. But I don't want to sacrifice my peace and serenity over it today. So my behavior starts to change. I start to work on it. I have not got real far into the steps. I always thought I had a knack for those things. I thought I could work them real fast and thorough, but I can't. I'm a perfectionist, and I'm not perfect at it. Now, it kind of seems sometimes like I want more out of this deal than it can offer me. My sponsor says time takes time. But I'm not patient. I mean, if I can feel good like this, I want to feel better. And one of the things my sponsor always tells me is there is no magic step. It takes all of them worked in the order they come when you're ready for them. But I keep thinking, if I just dig deep enough, I'm going to find some kind of magic cure, and that step is just going to fix me. And that's not it. It takes a long time. It takes a long time, and I'm still not done. But I know things are getting accomplished in my life. One of the problems I have not gone further than the 8th step. One thing I have had the opportunity to do is go and see that dad of mine who I have not seen for 19 years. I went and saw him a few months ago. And I don't know if anything good came out of that deal except for one thing. Because when I looked at him, he was no longer the giant I perceived him to be as a little kid. He was just another man. And not only that, he told me a little bit of his story. And I'm glad all I had to live with was mine. Anyway, so I'm working on those things, trying to clean up some of that past that I've made a wreckage of. I really did some damage. Not as much as some. Today, I have life pretty good. I have it real good. If you ask me, I have about as good a life as you can expect out of AA. All those things I wanted when I was a little kid or when I was a teenager, I wanted a car, a job, this, that. I got those things. But I found something out after I got them is that didn't make a difference at all. You know the way it feels to have a car? Same way you felt before you had it. Same thing with a job, same thing with a girlfriend. I feel the same thing. I feel the same way I did before I had it. The novelty wears off. And I find out all that does is a car makes me get to point A to point B a little better. You know, a job allows me to do little things on the weekend. But I still feel the same. The difference today is that I acquire peace of mind and spirit by being honest and helpful and unselfish. And that is not easy. I've been having a problem with selfishness. You know, I guess we all do. And one of the things I started doing is I looked up in the book where it talks about selfishness and how we get rid of it, and it says the first thing to do is we got to quit playing God. So I'm kind of trying to take a look at my actions. In what ways do I play God? So I can quit. Because I don't want that. Man, I felt so good. I think that night when I made the decision that I had enough, I think that I felt just about as much of humility as anybody can get. I was beat. And I knew where the power was. And I know that it wasn't in me. And I want that feeling, but I know that I can't have it by running around playing games and getting my way. And so when selfishness creeps up on me, I want to get rid of it. When pride creeps up on me, I want to get rid of it. I don't want anything to stand in the way of me getting sober and being happy and joyous and free. One of the things that I've had to do is I've had to change my lifestyle quite a bit. I don't like to play games. I don't want to play games. I want to do this thing the best I can. I figure I only got one shot. You know. And the only way I'd find out that I'd had a second one is if I drank and came back. And I don't want to take that chance. So I believe in making it a good first shot. I believe in holding on to it. I believe in stretching that pink cloud out and making it last. That's what I want to do. I'm going to close this thing up. I know it's early. No, it's not. I can't believe I talked that long. I'm grateful to be an alcoholic. But I want to tell a story. And it's a story I heard on a tape. It was about a speaker told it. But it just brought tears to my eyes when I first heard it. Because at that point, man, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. And some of you might have heard it. It's about a lady and her friend. They were walking down the beach. And there were all these starfish washed up the shore. On the beaches, there were thousands of them all over the place. And as these two people walked down, one of the persons would bend down and pick one up and throw it back into the ocean. And the other person would just look, "What are you doing?" And they'd walk a little ways, and the other person would bend down and pick one up and throw it into the ocean. And this other person finally, after this went on for a while, said, "What kind of difference do you think you're going to make by doing that when you have thousands of starfish all around here?" And looked and said, "It'll make all the difference in the world at this one." Thank you.